Welcome to the Goth Academy podcast. Hi everybody, hello Mallory Aler.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, our resident linguist.
Just visiting around.
Today we want to talk about Mindhunter. The second season was posted not a long time ago on Netflix. And this is the show, for those of you who don't know, who follow the creation or codification of the serial killer, the concept of a serial killer. But you have a different take on it. You think that basically it's a show about a very big misunderstanding.
Oh yes, I think the whole show is a part of Fincher's whole entire genre work in his films too, that just acutely express the disconnection, the misconnection that we have with other human beings, and how that lack of feeling connected to one another can literally drive us insane. I keep on thinking of Mindhunter and all these like little instances of the characters themselves having little to no chance at real connections with other human beings.
So there's a team. They have a constant miscommunication with each other,
Right.
In a very visceral and even non-verbal way. They all communicate very differently, but they just seem to speak different languages, and they find it very hard to connect between themselves. And the very concept of the show is trying to connect with serial killers, and the difficulties communicating with them.
Psychopaths are convinced that there's nothing wrong with them, so these men are virtually impossible to study. Yet you have found a way in near-perfect laboratory conditions. That's what makes this so exciting and potentially so far-reaching.
Please welcome Jonathan Groff.
It's based on a book called by John Douglas called Mindhunter. It's David Fincher's new Netflix series, and it's about the birth of criminal profiling in the late 70s.
Our next guest plays one of those men, the hard-boiled, beer-loving detective Bill Tench. Guys, give it up. Holt McGowan is here.
So Tench can't connect with his son, Brian. And he can't connect,
also.
and his wife. So he connects, though, better with Dr. Carr and with Holden. And it's just like this misplacement.
No.
So
Not so much.
sometimes I think he has like a real kind of father-son dynamic going on there. But Holden,
a disappointed father.
yeah, a disappointed father for sure.
Because Holden is very annoying too, in his defense. Okay, but go ahead.
Holden, no, Holden is such a pill. I would just, could you imagine being on a team with somebody like Holden? Could you imagine having to work on this kind of project with somebody like Holden? And it's just like he has no training, no wherewithal, all the arrogance in the world, and he's just one of these guys who I think is a real...
He has like Asperger or something, no? I don't know.
Yeah.
He doesn't really know how to read people, read a room. But you know what? I feel like I would get along with someone like that, because that's the kind of guy he is. So at least you know where things are coming from. Like he's not...
Right.
This is him.
And he's
okay.
He wants to do good. That's the clear call through it.
And he's motivated. I don't know.
Right.
I can work with people like that. Yeah.
And I can find like so many similar examples in Fincher's other movies where he has very similar protagonists who are unable to really connect but still exhibit like the deepest of our humanities.
For example.
Panic room.
Open the door, please.
A mother and daughter are completely cut off from the outside world when burglars invade their home. The girl with the dragon tattoo. Gone Girl. Zodiac. 7.
Wanting people to listen, you can't just tap them on the shoulder anymore. You have to hit them with a sledgehammer. And then you'll notice you've got their strict attention.
Fight Club.
So I think of a lot of his Social Network movie. You have Jesse Eisenberg playing Mark Zuckerberg, who is clearly on, another level of intellect, but he can't really form connections with just everybody else. And
Anybody else, even.
David Fincher really knows how to... He really knows how to show us what a genius is, and like the isolation of being, kind of gifted like that, and I think it shows through in the linguistics to kind of bring it back, because it all ties into something like communication. So in linguistics, there's a larger, broader field for English as a second language, and in that there's intercultural communications.
Intercultural communications, okay.
Yeah.
Like we are having now.
Right. We're talking about an English subject which concerns American criminal psychology.
Right. And English is my second language.
But we can also converse in like other languages as well. We're not just like limited to it. So with intercultural communication,
we're ragging now.
Yeah, we're so smart. We did our homework.
Okay, go ahead.
So in so much as like, why am I bringing up intercultural communications? And it's because it's an interdisciplinary practice. So that means that we can have a whole bunch of different fields contribute to the research or to the materials that we're trying to produce.
And there's a whole language and communication in the killing itself. There's like a ceremony, and you're sending a message to the police and to the FBI in the ways that you are operating. It's not you're not just like alone in a room and doing it just for yourself and nobody knows. Like you're sending some kind of message into the world.
Right. And I think that like it's really like coming to it's a dialogue. I think that's like part of the deepest, like most disturbing part of the criminal in this story is that like, why are they doing this? And it's this violent, grotesque method to just scream out for somebody to notice them, I guess. At least like that's something that Dr. Carr hints at in their language. They're fascinated with the impossible, always creating a fantasy, whether it be like on paper or via like photography, but it's a method of communication. Yeah. It's not necessarily like linguistics.
Yeah, and it's not just like a crime of passion. It's a very deliberate something, and there's a method to the way that you do it. Yeah, and it's communicating either whatever with a higher power or with society without society knowing or whatever.
Right.
It is. Yeah.
It's not easy butchering people. It's hard work. Physically and mentally, I don't think people realize you need to vent.
Edmund Kemper was the first killer that they interviewed, and it's the one that Holden has the most connection with.
And he's a real-life serial killer.
Oh, yeah. He was in the 60s. He was a co-ed killer, and he was basically the Zodiac before the Zodiac. He didn't do anything to openly entice or engage the police, but I think he's an anomaly, and I think that's why Fincher chooses to focus on him for his first, because he does these horrendous acts and then goes to prison, but while he's in prison he performs as a model citizen. He goes to the Bible study. I just read an article that like for years he contributed his voice for blind audiobooks, he's essentially behind the audiobook technology that comes into play. I don't think Audible would be very happy to know this.
It is not our job to commiserate with these people. It is our job to electrocute them.
With the language, though, it's the fact that they're all kind of mimicking each other that I think the real question of Mindhunter then becomes is like, okay, so the only people that we can gather data from are the ones that we caught, and they're all in communication with each other, and they all brag to each other, and it's all one big showmanship. So is the question like, are these answers valid? Like, or is it a manipulation? And I really like the way that Mindhunter plays with that in language. It's always so interesting. The most interesting parts of the show are when they're sitting down and you can just see the communicative levers like being pulled and and tables as they turn, or it's like watching chess almost. It's pretty neat. And I guess like I would want to focus on like the performance of a language and how through these intercultural dimensions, it's bad for society. And
killing people is bad? Are you...
Whoa. Yeah, yes.
I'm not sure I can leave that in the... You're on a limb. I don't know if I can leave that in the podcast.
I'm just against murder. I just don't know what to say.
I don't know. Very controversial. Very controversial.
A big part of intercultural communication depends on this hypothesis that a linguist by the name of Edward Sapir-Whorf came up with, and it states that language shapes our ideas and guides our view of social reality. It's a relativist point of view. Acts are neither good nor bad. So it's all entirely based on perception and worldview.
We can't like everything we do. We're talking to serial killers.
Serial killers.
New terminology.
The gang goes to Georgia.
Which is where you are.
Yes, and oh my gosh, every time they come to play down in the South, they get drilled, and they just run into this wall of resistance, and everyone's sitting there going, why, the BSU is so frustrated, the FBI is so frustrated, why is this, failing? We're just trying to do our jobs and to help. And I think I have the answer, and it lies in linguistics, it lies in intercultural communication, and I think it's because a lot of Americans take for granted the fact that they are native English speakers, and I think many Americans, and Americans and such are free to call me out if they feel differently, we all go to these huge states. We've talked several times about how big the United States is compared to the other countries and how that affects your life and how you live. With the United States being so large and there being just so many people in it, I think Americans have a very hard time understanding that in every single state there are counties, and in every single county there are district lines. And for every single district line, there's a different judge. And you just don't really have the chance to get that kind of detail if you're in 1970s, at Quantico. And I'm saying that, they kind of sent the team in without any of the... Because, like we said, this is just starting. This
from Washington. So this is the federal government sending...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're sending it to deal with a very localized problem.
Very localized, like a person over there in this area is killing people from this area.
Yeah.
This is very, very specific. Okay.
So, not to get too deep into spoilers, but spoilers.
Spoilers.
Full spoilers.
Yeah. I don't think our conversation spoils the show in any way. Go ahead.
Okay, so the first half of the second season is strictly them dealing with, one, the fallout that Holden caused with that stupid tape, and then trying to understand roles. That's what the first half is priming you for. Why? Because you're about to go to the South again, and these roles that have been established in the first half of the season are completely subverted and undone in the second half, and that's when
I feel that at the end, everybody goes back to their role. So the story follows in Georgia. You have the killing of black children, and Holden says so. He goes back. Holden starts out the season as he doesn't know who he is, what he should do. He ends the season as being right and correct. That the killer is black, he didn't cross racial lines, that he has that he's living with a family, it fits the profile perfectly, and the murderer follows his own profile, and Dr. Carr goes back to being this distant academic that has problem connecting. She tries, she fails, she goes back. I feel that this is why I think I enjoyed this season less than season 1, because there wasn't a clear narrative of the first episode where it starts and where the season ends. It's as if it ended midway through the season. But why do you think that everybody changes their roles?
So I didn't mean so much like in the sense that, because I agree with you. I think that as a response to this role upheaval that they experience in Georgia, they revert back to their original, they go back to themselves in a way. Dr. Card's a little different because she's stuck up there in DC with Greg. But Tension...
She's tried something else. She dates a bartender, and she tries to be more open and more sensitive to, and then she goes back to being this ice sculpture. She has a face like a chiseled, like as if it's chiseled in stone or something like that.
She looks like a modern Galadriel almost. She's very she's just like the cold, what is it, in the tarot card, the Empress. Like, she's very stoic, very reserved.
And Hench, Bill Hench, Holden's partner, he's in many ways opposite to Holden. Holden is very direct and but he doesn't know how to couch things, how to say things neatly, how to understand people's sensitivities and sensibilities. Just like this is it. But he can't connect with people like on an emotional level. And Bill Hench, he knows how to tell a story, and he knows how to make a crowd listen.
Everybody loves him.
Everybody loves him, but he can't communicate with his wife and with his kid. That's very dramatic.
What we've got here is failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach.
It's part of the reason why I like the first season so much, is because it really sets you up for what's to come, and you can go back and rewatch it and really see the falls that Bill Tench has, and like why Brian does what he does, and like why.
You can see that? I didn't know. I didn't understand why he does.
No. So Brian is a freak, and he's like, Nancy's like, he's fine. He's fine. Look at him. He's fine. He's like, how are you feeling today, Brian? Like,
well, but that's in the second season.
Man.
But is there something in the first season that makes him? Does he see any pictures of?
Yes, he's exposed. He's linguistically exposed to the crime.
Why?
How? Bill Tench brought home the case that was premiered in the pilot episode, where the mother and the son were killed, and it's horrendous. David Fincher does these really amazing quick snips of the photo where it's just, like, you just see enough to like, but and it changes over, and he does it so well that you later recognize it when the babysitter. They were out to dinner, and they had a babysitter, and when they get home, the babysitter's like, I don't want to come back here, like, this is enough, like, he's weird. And it was because Brian had either gone into the office or had somehow acquired this particular photograph, and I guess he learned the behavior.
Oh my goodness.
And so you really get to see it.
I wanted to go back to the linguistic part before I got you off track. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. So in this, like, in the part of one of the second or the third, it shows everybody in a church, and they're all there performing the ceremony. They're all praying the roles, but if you get this clear shot of Brian from his profile, and he is just not engaged. Like, he's doing it, he's following the motions, but he's not, like, engaged with his act. And I think that, in a sense, that leads more towards Bill's end of the story as far as a character, where his failure to fully engage in his personal life, the work that he does requires almost like a monk-like celibacy, in my opinion. You know, like, you won't have any friends. You won't have, the family that you have is probably very close, like Nancy was. Right. But yeah, go ahead.
And you were talking about performances, so he is always performing. Even like in his social life, he says, what are you doing for a living? Okay, I work at the behavioral science unit. What do you study? serial killers, and then everybody's like, oh, please tell me, everybody, like from the social worker that wants to see his son and the people at the barbecue. So it's like always has to be on. And then we see that he gets drunk and falls asleep, and he just like is not really engaging emotionally with his wife, because if you're always on, then I guess it's always like after the show you're like drained and you're like, oh, you can't communicate anymore.
It really takes a toll on you. I think when I mean like in intercultural communication, when we with all the interdisciplines, a big contributor to that is psychology. So there's a lot of attention given to how we perform and to what extent that performance is quote unquote like authentic. And when we're with people like you and me, even now, I don't know, I'd like to think that I'm being quite authentic, very, very genuine, but there's a degree of professionality to what we're doing. Like, I'm sitting in my office, it's the middle of the day kind of thing. And so like in different scenarios or different situations, it comes with a different performance. And I think a big part of what their failures in Georgia do is show you that they can pretty adequately perform in their environment, their very insulated environment.
Right.
And they can perform very well with
the bunker, not the bunker, the basement where they are.
The basement, yeah. And then they can interact very well. It's shocking how well they get along with the killers that they're talking to.
There's no procedural rule book for how to talk to these people.
If any of this is going to work, we need to talk to more subjects. More!
You want truffles? You gotta get in the dirt with the pigs.
How do we get ahead of crazy if we don't know how crazy thinks?
But they don't have like the Washington speak, let's say, of the head of the unit and the head of the FBI, unless it's Bill Hench who does like a very deliberate performance that is not genuine at all.
And it's strange to me that like, so in the second season there's a switch and the language switches too. So you had the old fuddy-duddy, who's kind of ushered out the door because he
old
messed
school,
up.
The head of the unit, yeah.
Right, and then like so he's out the door, but then they get this new guy to come in, and he is it just switches completely in tone, and he's like, I'm gonna give you guys Charles Manson,
and he's very verbal and very sweet talking. Something creepy about this guy.
It's creepy.
There was one scene where he opened Dr. Carr's
he opens her blouse
shirt or blouse. I'm like, this is like,
and she's like.
You're like a kind of it was very creepy, very creepy.
So we have these new modes of communication and language happening in DC, and the gang's faring pretty well, but they go to the South and it's like you went through the looking glass, everything is flipped, and all of a sudden these terms and I guess requests or protocols, that existed in language, that doesn't exist in Georgia the way that it exists in Quantico. So it's very...
Explain.
Yeah.
For example.
So I'm not an FBI agent. I'm just going to put that out there. But FBI, if you're listening, my name is Mallory Aler. And I would love to join.
Right, Aler. I said Aler. You have one Ale in your name, right? So it's Aler. Right.
Aler, Aller. I prefer, I actually really like the Aller. I like that a lot. It's really fun. It's always fun to hear people try to pronounce, your name if it's pretty wild. But
okay. So you're not an FBI agent yet?
No, not yet. Not yet. Have not been recruited.
Let's not rule anything out. Yeah. It's the middle of the day for you now. You don't know.
Exactly. I could get a call anytime from Director Gordon Cole. And the language of the FBI, if it's anything like my line of work, there are protocols and procedures that each of your agents or your workers, your employees, have to do. They have to follow this procedure. They have to do this protocol. And it's why so much attention is paid in the beginning to the questionnaire, because they're performing a study in the North, so to say. They have not been touched in what Georgians would call the real South, rail South now, and it really bites them in the ass. Like, I'm sorry to swear, but like it really. No. FBI application canceled.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't swear at all.
Yeah. And but it really comes in, it really bites them in the butt, is what I'm saying. And
in the behind.
Oh yes. And then just like, so every single time they go to play ball down there, like Georgians are just running circles around it. And I think that because of the characters' quirks in their own psychology and personality, like Holden being probably undiagnosed Asperger's, somewhat on spectrum. I don't want to assume or speculate, but he has personal quirks and can't communicate very well, even in his home environment.
Yeah.
But we've taken him and we put him in one of the most interculturally fraught regions in the United States.
Georgia.
So, yes, in Georgia, Atlanta specifically. So,
at a turning point in its history.
Yes. So the brief history of Georgia can be this, or not Georgia, well, Atlanta, is that Atlanta was once on Creek and Cherokee Indian Territory. We systematically removed the Creek and the Cherokee because they lost the War of 1812. And I live in Macon, Georgia, and that's exactly in the middle of the state, like right smack in the middle. And then Atlanta is a little further up.
Okay.
So what we had then was like all of the Civil War happens, slavery happens. I don't have enough time to really get into the details of it, but it was terrible. What I'm saying though is that like we began the city by this systematic violence against people. It sits on top of there, and Atlanta was a real kind of point of a costal for the Jim Crow racism laws in the South, and also just of a systematic. It was a system of getting rid of Black Americans, of getting rid of just anybody who was really getting in your way, so to say. But at the same time, Atlanta's always been very concerned with presentation and with image. Atlanta's always viewed itself as something very different than the rest of Georgia. And it's more apparent now in our modern society because it's more progressive. It's one of the cultural points of Southern Black culture, in my opinion. That was the historical background for it. But the theme of it is, this is a pressure cooker, and we're just going to keep on piling the bodies, And Georgia, Atlanta, is a very controversial city because of things like redlining and gerrymandering.
About the Southern presentation, right? So there's like a lot of emphasis on the Southern way of talking and being polite and the imagery in the language. So on the one hand, this violence, this pressure cooker, that was a good image. And on the other hand, presenting yourself as very polite, very cultured, I don't know if cultured, but very hospitable.
Right. So one of Holden's first miscommunications that he has is with the young...
hotel worker.
Yes, Tracy, or Trudy, I can't remember her name. Okay. It's important to know the actress because she is from Atlanta. So her name is Sierra McLean, I believe, and she was a part of a singing trio that has a record label outside in Atlanta. But it was crazy because I thought at first, I was like, man, like that accent is just so like, that's so crazy. That is an Atlantan accent, but she has an affect on it. It's a little bit more polished. It's very precise. It's a performance.
Oh, very nice. Like, she did very well. She does sound like that, exactly like that.
This is the best dinner in Atlanta. Oh, why don't you come with me, Holden? And Holden, and he thinks he's going to get a date out of this. Yeah. He gets dressed, he gets up and excited. Yeah. But that's not what she's communicating. If you're from Georgia, you know that like when you're on duty, what she's doing is very brave, I think, by breaking what we're saying, breaking this protocol of behavior and this performance. I thought like what she told Holden, where she's like, you don't make promises, like don't make promises. I think that strictly speaks to the Black experience in Atlanta culturally and historically. And what we're talking about in terms of linguistics and intercultural communication, she's very plainly, very abrasively almost presenting her worldview to Holden. And she's like, this is the South.
Deal
like,
with it. This is my reality. Deal with it, yeah.
And what we're talking about with this intercultural presentation of your society and, you know, your gender, any kind of like expression that you have, it's always going to try to suppress the less liked. So a big theme is the BSU and the FBI constantly being roadblocked by the Atlanta politics of the time. And I think that it's because of this that Holden's classic misunderstanding occurs. He does not understand that law and government and practice of said law and government are inextricably linked vis-a-vis politics. And that's how we do things down here. Like it's a real Southern way of saying it, but like that's just how we do things down here. Like,
no, I want to go back for a second to his communication with his understandably abrasive mothers.
Yes,
he kind of takes it very well because they are very direct, and he doesn't need to read anything between the lines. They're just telling him this is how it is. Boom, 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 and he's not offended. Doesn't feel bad. He just like, and he understands them. Okay, I understand why they're acting this way. At least I know what I'm playing with. When he has to give a toast, when he wants to give a toast to the retiring head of his unit, or talk to the whatever bigwigs at the FBI, there he doesn't know how to operate because of the different protocols. And the mothers are like, I already lost the most important thing in the world to me. I don't have time for protocols. This is it. Take it or leave it.
I don't think Holden's miscommunication is so much like, how should I say it? It's overwhelmed by his empathy for this community, right? And he wants to do anything he can to help out. But the miscommunication, it lies in the Southern perspective of power, prestige, and you have privilege. Holden has privilege. He's a white man. He's in the FBI. Yeah. He's a part of this like super succinct, heavily funded, psychological approaching program. He is so concentrated on his own theory of who it could be that he's kind of ignoring. I don't think it's explicitly saying like, it could have been something else, but a real world fact is that the production of this season has reopened the Atlanta child murder cases in Atlanta.
What do you mean?
Our mayor just reopened the case. It was a cold case. Yeah. And
because of Mindhunter?
Because of the questions that it asks about in Mindhunter. It was somewhat controversial then, or not that it was controversial. Like, you didn't talk about it then, but they try to hint at it, and they're saying things like, look, up until like 1974, half of the police force was in the Klan. Half of this, like, we've had to do a complete restructuring of the police system from county to county. And what I guess the Southern investigation was trying to imply was that because of the racial element, they were turning a blind eye to possible unflattering avenues because of the want to present the image of Atlanta,
Just like for the context, there's like a newly firstly elected black mayor.
Yeah.
And there's like a new airport and want to present Atlanta as a tourism city. And they don't want to talk about the murders. And also the African American community doesn't want to think that the killer comes from its own ranks. It can't be that you also have perpetrators in your own ranks. But it ended in such a weird way. It ended as if, okay, he was caught, and then you see he wasn't charged for, nobody was charged for whatever this or that and this and that, and that's it. I'm like, what? I didn't understand exactly what the season was about. I wanted another episode with the fallout of what they did right, what they did wrong, what worked, what didn't work.
Right.
Maybe getting some feedback where we are now, because it starts out with this big promise of this unit now getting upgraded and going to the next level and getting more workers and more budget, but there's none of that throughout the season. It's just, I don't know, it's very uneven, and it wasn't nearly as gripping as the first season. It was interesting because the topic is interesting and the acting is good.
Mm-hmm. But it just wasn't Mindhunter season 1 for you.
Yeah, and I didn't understand what it was about. If I can't tell you what was the story about, then it means that it didn't land. So the first season was about this guy that is inherently sweet, but has a problem communicating it. Can't communicate it verbally, but you can feel that he's sweet. He's meeting a new woman, and she becomes his girlfriend, partner, whatever. Mm-hmm. But as he's communicating with killers, he absorbs their negative energy, and his inability to connect to communicate just becomes, instead of endearing, becomes just like annoying. And then he alienates people in his life, and he finds himself that his best friend, quote unquote, is this camper serial killer. That
who
was
he's
the
terrified of.
Yeah. So what am I doing there? I don't know. He doesn't know he's going on a voyage that he doesn't understand. But the second season, he's relegated to the back of the bus.
Yeah.
And you have two other main characters, very unclear what the story, as a story, where it was going.
So we're talking a lot about intercultural connection, intercultural communication, and I think one of the more intriguing scenes is the interviews that Dr. Carr has. She's talking with one, and the one interaction is very interesting, but I like the second one that she has more, where she's talking about the connection, which is the overall theme of the show, I think. And she's like, why did you do this? You had exhausted yourself, you had exhibited pleasure, you were with your lover. So what set you off? What stressed you? What triggered you? And he was like, it wasn't a soul act. He didn't connect with me in that deeper way. And I thought that was so interesting because she starts trying to, she's trying to find the answer through him. She's like, please tell me what makes a person a person. And I like how in the end he kind of becomes a little bit aware of it, and he's just like, are you asking me what an individual does and the individual choices that they make and why they do this? Because lady, that's kind of your job. I'm out. I'll see you later. So Dr. Carr is kind of what we were saying, this ice queen alone, only she has the knowledge. And I think in realizing that, she in turn is a little bit more desperate for authentic human connection. And that's why I think the girlfriend is there in the show, is to show that Dr. Carr is trying to change herself. She's going out on a limb, but that the people around her and people in our lives are always on, as you were saying. Yeah.
This girlfriend is definitely on. She's putting on a show. She's performing for her ex-husband and saying that, I'm not dating anybody serious, and her pitch is different, right?
Mindhunter is such an innovative show because I believe that it really and explicitly shows through all forms of language this process. And I think it's also a very great statement piece about Southern America. And I'm very proud of David Fincher and his attention to detail, because he really, I felt, captured a lot of the city.
I think this is a very unique take. Thank you. That was very interesting.
Awesome. I'm very happy that you had the patience to listen to me on it.
Come on. So thank you everybody for tuning in. And if you are not following our podcast, then you should. We have a lot of interesting conversations, not only from a linguistic point of view, from a historical point of view, scientific point of view, psychological point of view, all kinds of takes. Also, we do social justice on screen and in movies. Boom. And if you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/GothAcademy and help us continue to grow and add more topics and more cool contributors like Mallory Aler, aka Mallory Aler. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time. Bye everybody.
Bye, thank you.